Hello, music lovers of YouTube. Welcome to episode 49 of What Makes This Song Special. As always, I've got a story for you that relates to a song in my past. A story that when I hear this song, it takes me back to that time, that event in my life. And I will then follow up with my own cover version of the song, which I'll leave a wee clickbait for you at the end of the episode. I'm going to go back today to the summer of 1995. We were living in a little village in the south side of Glasgow called Waterfoot. The part that we lived in was kind of two streets, really, that sort of joined together to form a circle or an oval. It was quite remote. There was a bus that took you to Glasgow that stopped at the top of the road. And there was a bus on the other side of the road that stopped off to take you through Eaglesham and up to East Kilbride. And that was pretty much it. Other than that, surrounded by fields. Quite a fun place to stay in terms of adventure. There wasn't much to do. I think I would have not enjoyed it so much as an older teenager, but at the time I was maybe only about 13 or something like that, so it wasn't a problem. I think if I'd been 17, 18 it would have been a pain, because there wasn't really much to do and it was hard to get anywhere without having to get lifts and taxis and things like that. So we'd moved in there about a year before this story, and having just moved from Clarkston, which was further down the road, to Italy and then back in the space of a few months, we sort of immediately felt like outsiders living in this small community suburb of the south side of Glasgow. It seemed like the neighbours had already formed their own friendships, and they would always have garden parties and barbecues and things like that, and we were never invited. So we also hadn't moved school when we moved from when we lived in Clarkston, so all of the kids who went to Mearns Castle that lived in the area probably saw us, me and my brothers, as sort of as William Wood boys, as the enemy from the outset. The first few months were pretty strange. We'd always made friends everywhere we'd gone. You know, usually the international language of football would be enough to spark a friendship anywhere in the world, whether it was Italy, Germany, or even, I think once at a transport cafe in Switzerland, we always managed to find a couple of pals to have a game of football with for 15 minutes. Language was never a barrier if you had a football as a kid. Unfortunately, this wasn't the case in the street we moved into at the time. The lads weren't that friendly, and it took a while until we met our first pal. His name was Paul Healy, and we've now been friends for nearly 30 years, like family, like cousins, and he's actually the guitarist in the band with me. So anyway, that's all for a different story, another time. At the time of this story, he was also a bit of an outcast. He was fairly new to the street as well. I think he'd moved in just a few months before us, and he went to a different school to the local lads as well. He was at the Catholic school, and that didn't go down well with the Rangers fans in the area, for anyone who knows about the Celtic Rangers rivalry in the west of Scotland. Silly stuff. So anyway, Paul started playing football with us one afternoon, and the rest was history. We had a pal, and he was instantly magnetised to our house. Firstly, for pals to play with. Me and my brothers gave him 3 new friends, but more than that, I think he kept coming round the house for his obsession with the Italian food. He'd never tried exotic Italian food before. I suppose thinking back 30 or almost 30 years now, it's hard to believe that, because I suppose in most cities in the world you can try foods from anywhere in the world, which is amazing. If you go to any major city, you can try food from India and China and Thailand and Italy and France and wherever else. Whereas back then it was pretty much whatever your mum put down in front of you. And if you lived in Scotland, it was usually mince and tatties. Paul, being from a sort of Irish-Scottish background, probably had things like Irish stew, mince and tatties, that type of thing, or mince and potatoes for the non-Scottish speakers. So, yeah, he was, he had his first bowl of lasagna in our house, his first homemade pizzas, and he just kept coming back for more. He would just smell my mum and dad's cooking from round the corner. He just stayed a few houses round the corner, and he would knock on the door, and before even asking, are the boys coming out, he would always say, are you making lasagna, Mrs. Frankie? That was the common theme. So My mum's lasagna dishes, pasta dishes, my dad's pizza, minestrone soup was enough to secure us a new pal who kept coming round to play football. The downside was that we were still outnumbered in the area. We played football in the street corner, practicing our overhead kicks and diving headers on the concrete. And we always wanted more participants for a game, but it wasn't really the friendliest of atmospheres when the other kids were around. Usually resulted in sort of fights, arguments, that type of thing. So anyway, back to 1995. This is a year on from his meeting. We've been living there for, just over a year by this point, and we were always happy if someone new moved in to the neighbourhood to see if we could grow our little football team, which was like 4 or 5 people. And we saw that somebody was moving in right across the street from us, and we waited with excitement and bated breaths to see if it would be kids our age. And we were gutted when it turned out to be what looked like an older couple, maybe retired. But then a few weeks after they moved in, right in the middle of the summer, 1995, we see these 3 lads emerge from the house, dressed in basketball t-shirts and baseball caps, with strange haircuts, looking like they stepped off the set of sort of an American school sitcom. And they were 3 brothers about the same ages as me and my brothers. And they were from the Lake District. I think they were from like Keswick in the Lake District, which is the north of England. So they came up with their kind of strange north of England accents that we weren't used to. And they were up visiting their grandparents for the summer. And of course, we desperate to make some new pals and have a bigger football team. We started kicking the football around with them, and they taught us some basketball moves and rules about basketball that we were unaware of. And we hung out for a few weeks that summer. It was a great summer actually in the end. And the oldest brother, who was about my age, I think his name is Danny, I can't remember everybody's name, but he used to always have these headphones round his neck. I don't know why, but even when they weren't plugged into anything, they just used to walk about with these headphones round his neck when we were playing. And at that time, I was obsessed with music, as I always have been. And I'd already started playing my first guitar by this point. I was listening to Guns N' Roses, Bon Jovi, Iron Maiden, Black Sabbath, 70s and 80s guitar bands, which is what I was right into at the time. I liked heavy guitars, guitar solos, big rock voices that could sing powerfully and had crazy ranges. I loved all that. And so I asked him what he was listening to on these headphones that he kept wearing everywhere, and he let me hear some music on his Sony Discman, which was a portable CD player before iPods and iPhones were a thing for any younger viewers. A CD Walkman sort of thing, a Discman it was called. And I put on these headphones of his to have a listen to what he was listening to, and I was disgusted. I was immediately disgusted. This was a guitar band, but with no proper guitar solos. Guys just strumming chords and singing in strong Manchester accents. It was horrible. Tried to get him into Iron Maiden, and he was equally disgusted with my offerings. And we debated it the whole summer and during that school holiday. And what happened that summer was that everywhere I went, every time we went into town or whatever, to a shopping mall, if you call it a shopping mall in America, a shopping centre, I started seeing and hearing more and more about this band, Oasis. They seemed to have taken Britain by storm almost overnight. They were everywhere. There were posters of them, pictures of them everywhere in every shop, and the logo, the name Oasis was everywhere. And when I went back to school in August, Oasis mania was there too. Everybody at school was talking about Oasis, and they were putting Oasis pin badges on their blazers and on their school bags and swapping CDs. People who had never been interested in guitar music, like people who hadn't been interested in guitar music before, or even music, were all of a sudden picking up acoustic guitars and attempting to play Wonderwall. And the level of disdain that I had for all of this was humongous. It was through the roof. I hated them. I hated Oasis. I hated that people were impressed by it. I hated the thought that everybody was like a sheep, and because somebody had said that this band were good, everybody else thought they were good. Another fad, a fashion statement, and I wanted no part of it. I didn't want to be anywhere near it. So I stayed in the last just listening to my old bands. I stayed just listening to all the old stuff. And the years went by. And fast forward a few years, and the Oasis fad was over. The band have split up. The Sheep have moved on to something else to follow. And all of a sudden, I'm able to look at Oasis with more mature musical ears and a fresh perspective that isn't sort of clouded by me not wanting to be the same as everybody else, because that was always a thing for me. I wanted to be different. I didn't want to be like everyone else. And by this point, I'm playing in piano bars. I'm in my late teens, early 20s. I'm playing piano bars, and people are requesting songs. And I'm trying to learn as many songs as I can, different styles, so that I can keep getting more work, more gigs. I keep getting asked back to the different piano bars I'm playing in. And a common request was Oasis. And most of their stuff's quite guitar-led and quite strummy. So I was trying to think of an Oasis song that I could play and sing on the piano in a piano bar setting that would sound cool and it would fit. And so I managed to get a hold of one of, I think I borrowed their first album, Definitely Maybe, off of my friend Gordon Hall at the time. I think he had a copy of it in his bedroom, and I said, can I borrow this? And I stuck it on in my room one day, and I was instantly transported back to that summer of 1995 when Oasis Mania was at its peak, and playing football in the street with new friends, fighting with the kids that we didn't go on with, arguing about bands and guitarists late into summer nights, and the songs, retrospectively, the songs are amazing. Like, I had to admit it, they're great pop songs. They're just amazing pop songs. Noel Gallagher's just got such a great knack of writing amazing pop songs, amazing melodies, sing-along anthemic choruses, timeless classics. And all of a sudden I'm having to admit that I don't hate Oasis anymore. And over the years, even since then, I've played at thousands of weddings, and I must have covered almost every single Oasis song ever written, because people still request them. People, even young folk, I see young people coming up to me at weddings, and I'm trying to guess what they might be about to ask for, and quite often I think, maybe they'll ask for something really modern like Ed Sheeran or, I don't know, Beyonce, Rihanna, current artists, Lewis Capaldi, and they come up and they ask for Oasis. They ask if we can play She's Electric, or they ask for Don't Look Back in Anger, or they ask me to play Live Forever, or young folk who weren't even born until after that summer that I met those lads from the Lake District. And so I have to say that I was wrong. It doesn't happen very often, but I was wrong. Oasis are amazing. What a band. They're such a great band. And the song that reminds me most of that time, I think, is Slide Away, because it was one that I used to play in the piano bars, because it was an easy one to sort of, pianoify, if you like. And I think, being a sucker for a ballad, it was probably the type of song of theirs that, even when I hated them, was the one that I tried hardest not to love, because it is a great song, especially slowed down. The slowed down versions I really like, which I'll do a kind of slowed down version of in part 2. But a great song that reminds me of being a young teenager, being naive, feeling like the world's against you, and not realising that you're having the time of your life. So just, a great track, Slide Away. A wee bit about the song. Noel Gallagher said that the song wrote itself, I think he said in an interview once, on a Les Paul guitar that had been given to him by Johnny Marr. I don't know if it was a present or if it was a loan of the guitar, but Johnny Marr of the Smiths had sent him this guitar, and apparently he picked it up, and Slide Away just came out. And apparently when they went to record it, Liam Gallagher, the singer, and Bonehead, who was the rhythm guitarist at the time, had a big fight about the tempo of the track, and Liam stormed off to the pub, came back in with a few pints in him, and stuck down the vocal in one take, which is pretty cool. And a little side fact that I learned about this song is that Slide Away is apparently Paul McCartney's favourite Oasis song as well, so that's something we have in common. We'll talk a bit about the singer. I always do a wee bit of a less than a minute breakdown of the singer's technique. Liam Gallagher needs no introduction as a human. As a singer, he has that strong Manchester accent that was probably the thing that put me off Oasis most when I first heard them, because it's just a very strong accent and I wasn't used to that when they came out. But now I actually quite like it. I think it suits the songs. I mean, I don't think anyone could imagine anybody else singing Oasis songs other than Noel and Liam with that accent that they've both got. He's got a really clean, compressed vocal style, but then throws in the odd overdriven, slightly distorted sound that rasps through and takes their sound from the kind of the ballad sound that you get on Wonderwall and songs like Live Forever into a real rock and roll band sound, like the voice that he uses on Cigarettes and Alcohol, for instance. You just get bags of charisma, which also comes across in his voice, as well as his stage presence, his sort of stage persona, and of course that very undeniable nasal twang that has become a bit of a parody on words like sunshine, which everybody tries to mimic. But according to producers and engineers over the years, he was famous for putting down near perfect vocals in the studio consistently. In terms of his pitching, it was always bang on. Even when he was full of bevy and all sorts, he could just walk into the studio and put down a perfectly pitched vocal. So a really iconic sound that will definitely go down in music history. So there we have it. There's my wee story. A short one this weekend, this week. But short story, and a great band that I used to hate and now have to admit that I do quite love. A great song, which I will cover in part 2. Please like, subscribe, share, tell your pals to tune in if they like music and if they like hearing wee stories about songs. I'll be back next week with another story and another song. Thank you so much for watching.